everybody, to the 37th Annual California Small Farm Conference. My name is Evan Wigg. I'm with Community Alliance with Family Farmers, and we're excited to have you here for the final workshop of day one here at the conference. And we are going to be talking about wildlife safe ranching. We have a wonderful expert in the field, Gowan Batist, and we are excited to have her here. Thanks so much for being here, Gowan. I just want to encourage everybody out there watching to interact using the chat feature that you'll see there at the bottom of your screen. If you want to introduce yourself, let us know where you're coming from, any resources or insights that you might have. You can also use the Q&A feature also there at the bottom. If you have any questions, Gowan will make sure to leave some time at the end of the workshop to answer that. And with that, just a huge thank you to Gowan for being here, sharing her expertise, and to all of you for coming out and engaging in this very important topic. And with that, I will hand it over to you, Gowan.
Thank you so much, Evan. I love this event and have enjoyed participating in the past and really glad to get to do this today. So here we go. Hi, my name is Gowan Batiste, and I am a co-owner and manager of Fortunate Farm in Mendocino County. And I have been involved in sheep in one way or another since I was a little kid in Northern California on the coast, which means I have also been involved in wildlife and depredations since I was a little kid and have been living really closely with this issue and learning through it for really the last 20 years. And that process of learning has led me to working with the Mountain Lion Foundation. The Mountain Lion Foundation has kind of empowered me to go out and help farmers and ranchers around the whole country, not just California, learn how to safely manage coexisting with large predators. So we do focus on mountain lions, but I also help people with the whole North American suite of carnivores. And also just want to encourage y'all, it won't be disruptive. If you have a question as we're going through this, just drop it in the Q&A, and we'll go ahead and get into it. So starting off with some agreements and assumptions here, this can be a tough topic. I've been there. I've had depredations. I've had my animals killed. I've had my animals mangled and mauled, but not killed and had to dispatch them. It's rough. As we go through this, we're prioritizing human safety. We're prioritizing the safety of domestic animals. We're following the law. We're following the most rigorous and current rangeland science. Um, I recommend peer-reviewed methods because that is the agreement with where I'm coming from. I definitely want to hear about everybody's anecdotal evidence, and that is how we start to get things into the scientific community. But I'm only recommending peer-reviewed tools in this talk. And we remain open. We change our mind when we get new information. We ground test, we field test, we listen to scientists. So introducing the mountain lion, so Puma concolor, you can see that they are the smallest of the cats that have been on the ground on this continent during the Pleistocene, which in evolutionary terms was like a blink of an eye ago. This is a cat that lived alongside the American cheetah, jaguars, the American lion, which is bigger than the African lion, saber-toothed tigers. This is also just cats, also dire wolves, short-faced bears, all manner of really big creatures. So part of the mountain lion's tendency to use stealth as their primary way of getting by in the world comes from the fact that they co-evolved not being an apex predator on the landscape. So mountain lion range, so everywhere in North and Central and South America is current or former mountain lion habitat, except where it gets too cold. So only part of Canada. Where you can see red, that's current range. Where you can see this kind of pink color, that's where lions are potentially coming back, and yellow is former range. So I want to be really clear because every time I show a chart like this, people are like, well, I saw a mountain lion in Vermont or Maryland. That can 100% happen. There's been a verified mountain lion in Connecticut. They have made it as far as the East Coast. When we say that there's not a population, we mean there's not breeding females. Individual young males can travel really far looking for their own territory. And when they don't find females, they tend to just keep going. So they can go pretty far. Behavior, they're obligate carnivores. They're a lot more social than we once thought. We now have better camera equipment. We can see their behavior more. They often live in overlapping communities of females and their cubs. Their kittens stay with their mothers until 2 years old or more. They're dependent. They're quite dependent for a long time. There's very low sexual dimorphism. It's hard to tell males from females apart. Adolescents may be fully dependent on their mothers and not look any different from their mothers. So they have fairly complicated social interaction. You can see them anytime. I sometimes have people say, oh, it was broad daylight, and they think that that means that there was something wrong with that mountain lion. It usually doesn't. They're most active at dusk and dawn. They're crepuscular, which is the word for that. But you can see them at 2 p.m. or 2 a.m. When threatened, they may run away. That's usually what people expect a lion to do, and they have this very unnerving tendency not to do that. More often, they will walk or they will sit down, and they will often sit down and then yawn, which is, really freaks people out. From their logic, they're afraid if they run away from you, they're going to trigger your chase response. They're looking at you as a predator and they're afraid of being chased. The best thing to do is slowly increase your distance, not turn and run yourself. Rarely a mountain lion might bluff charge, and I've been bluff charged, and it's quite an experience. It's a big display with a lot of sound and a lot of kicking up dust and doing these big paw bounces. And it's not a hunting, behavior. That's a fear behavior. So managing the population. So everywhere in the United States, including in California in the modern colonial era, extermination of this species was the government's stated goal. There was a bounty system, including in California, that paid people money per pair of cougar ears. And they were wiped out by the thousands and actually successfully extirpated on much of the East Coast. What we know now, partially because we can compare areas where mountain lions were in the past and aren't now, and also areas where mountain lions are returning, because in parts of the eastern US they are, is how crucial they are to ecosystems. They are an umbrella species. They have some of the most interactions with other species of any carnivore ever studied. This is from a study by Ripple and Beshta in 2006. It shows that areas of Zion National Park that have cougar presence have increased biodiversity on every trophic level, from large mammals to streambed invertebrates to, plant diversity to beetles. Actually, one way that a field researcher told me that they can generally tell that there are lions in an area is just by looking at the beetle diversity. So lions are a very important scaffold animal. Dispersal in territory, one male tends to essentially have a harem of multiple females whose territories are smaller and may overlap. Females don't tend to go very far from where they're born, males do. And this is part of why mountain lion populations are very intensely self-regulating. Dominant male mountain lions are the biggest threat to young male mountain lions. It's a reason why they will walk as far as Connecticut. They'll go thousands of miles. And it's another reason why when hunters go and take out the biggest, strongest dominant males, we see chaos in their communities. And the result is not less conflict, but what we've seen in study after study is more conflict. Habitat and prey. Mountain lions love slightly sloped, partial tree cover, anywhere with a lot of deer. And if you happen to live in Northern California, particularly in Sonoma, Mendocino, anywhere in the oak woodlands, that probably describes where you live. Mountain lions mostly eat deer. Mountain lions usually need to be 3 or older before they could take an elk. Some mountain lions figure out how to eat other novel species as well. There's mountain lions who have figured out how to eat porcupines and who specialize in them. There's mountain lions who figured out how to catch spawning salmon and eat fish and will do that and teach their cubs that. They're individuals. Generally speaking, the majority of their diet is deer, but they are adaptable and they do learn, and that is part of how they can come into conflict with us. So carnivores follow prey, prey follows water. So this photo is from Clark County, Nevada. These are bighorn sheep, which are they're a threatened species, but they also are natural prey for mountain lions. And they're on a golf course because it was a really bad drought year. So anytime we have drought or wildfire, deer, other wild animals, native ungulates mostly, but smaller mammals as well, they come closer to where people are because we tend to protect vegetation from fire. We have irrigation. We're where the water is. So prey comes closer to us, and so lions come closer to us. So typically, a couple years after a fire, the lion population will be more disorganized, more disordered. Like I said, they have really elaborate social relationships with each other. So when a big disruptive event like a fire happens, it throws their community into chaos for a while, much like our communities. They'll tend to become more diurnal and they may take more risks. So in my work, I hear the most about conflicts during drought years and after fires. So population management, it's a common belief that lions need to be hunted in order to manage their population. That's not what we find in the scientific data. In California, hunting's not allowed, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. But for a lot of us who, it seems like it would make intuitive sense because so many other animals that are out there do benefit from population management, such as wild ungulates. Lions are really self-regulating. If you look up in that tree at this treed lion, can you tell if that's a male or a female? Probably not, and I guarantee you neither can those hunters. Like I said previously, they have a low level of sexual dimorphism. The females and males look almost exactly alike. It's sometimes even difficult for, professionals who've worked with cougars in the field for decades to tell the difference from video or from a distance like this. And for about 80% of their life, females have dependent kittens. So hunting tends to create social chaos, which can create more conflict. Orphaned teenage cougars are really the highest liability demographic of cougars, and that they're almost an inevitability when we have hunting. So mountain lions and humans. So this is a lion with the lights of LA in the background. In general, mountain lions are better at coexisting with us than we are with them. There isn't a lot of untrammeled wilderness anymore. Most mountain lions are born and raised being around humans a lot. We have a lot of video that shows them using public hiking trails, stepping off the trail, having a person and their dog go by, stepping back on the trail and continuing on their way. If you've been out in the woods, they've seen you, and you probably haven't seen them. If you have seen them, feel free to tell me about it in the chat. I always love seeing that. But they're here and they're going to be here. The data that we have from mountain lion reintroduction into South Dakota, which has a population of about 800,000 versus California, which is about 32 million, is that mountain lion reintroduction into South Dakota saves South Dakota about $1.2 million per year, and so far about 100 human lives. And that is in reduction of vehicle strikes with deer alone. Mountain lions tend to hunt deer that hunters don't want, especially deer who are sick with chronic wasting disease and Lyme disease, which mountain lions don't get. Deer that are small, deer that are sick and weak, and deer kill a lot of people every year. So if you compare a population of 800,000 to a population of 32 million, right there you can see how much we would stand to lose if we lost mountain lions. So Ring camera, I saved this ad because it is like, it's so emblematic to me of, there's a perception that I hear a lot of invasion. There's never been this many before. There's a couple of things going on. Part of it is that there has been an increase in some conflicts, especially on farms and ranches that are bordering land that is burning with more frequency and greater intensity in the last couple of decades. But the other thing that's new is the availability and affordability of these cameras. The vast majority of sightings that get reported to me are not seen in person, they're seen on camera, and they're just a walkthrough sighting. So the idea that there's more of them than there's ever been, and that, we're being invaded by mountain lions, we're being invaded by ring cameras. And as far as the mountain lion population of California, a mid-range estimate is around 3,500 total cats for the entire state. That's 3,500. So that's not too many. So California mountain lion law. So we don't have any hunting in California of mountain lions, and we have a 3-strike rule. What that means is that before a depredation permit, which means a legal permit issued to you to take lethal action against a mountain lion, can be issued, there has to be 3 offenses, and you have to demonstrate that you have done something proactive to protect your animals in the meantime. This can get frustrating for people because that 3-strike rule applies to one APN, one property. And that's not the reality for a lot of small farmers, a lot of small homesteaders who have like 5 acres all next to each other. A mountain lion might not depredate the same small ranch or same small homestead 3 times. They might hit every neighbor on the block, and that's a different APN and a different 3-strike rule. So that can be a source of a lot of frustration for people, but that is the current law. That does not mean that you can't protect yourself and your livestock. If there's a caught in the act permit process, which is if you or your animals are in immediate physical danger, which does not mean a mountain lion is walking across your field. It means a mountain lion is actively attacking you, your dog, your goat. You can take lethal action to protect yourself. What you were supposed to do immediately after that is call CDFW. They'll give you a verbal permit over the phone, and then they will come out, take that lion, do an autopsy, do an investigation. That is what is supposed to happen. And the reason why I'm really belaboring this so much is I've heard a lot of ranchers just not be familiar with this, and then in mixed company, in public, really put themselves out there as not following this law. And people do get prosecuted. There's someone in Southern California who just was charged with shooting a mountain lion that actually did do some depredations, but he did not have a permit, and the lion was not in the act of attacking animals when he shot it. I have heard ranchers say that because they have an ag property status, that they have an ag designation, they have an ag business, that if an animal is harassing their livestock, they can shoot it, and they view a mountain lion's mere presence as harassment, therefore it's within their legal rights to shoot it. That's not true. It won't hold up in court. You absolutely can be charged for a crime for doing this. That's not what I want. That's not what anybody wants. The ag community is my community. I want you all to be safe. I want you to know what the law is. So that's what it is. So California mountain lion depredation permits, which means, okay, this lion really is a habitual threat. These are the numbers from 2003 to 2015. So you can see permits issued in 2015 were 256. Actual cats killed were 107. So you have to actually be able to find the mountain lion, and they're pretty elusive. And then how many necropsies were actually performed as well. Something about this chart is there's a USDA APHIS study, and they are the government trapping contractor. They are the people who most often are actually killing these cats and conducting these autopsies. So this is not an animal rights organization that's doing this study. This is the Trapper study, said that from 2003 to 2012, only about 25% of the cats that were killed with depredation permits were a DNA match to the cat that killed whatever the livestock was. And only about 25% had a target species in their stomach. So that means about 75% of the cats that were killed, either it wasn't the right cat or it wasn't a cat in the first place. So that's really important to keep in mind here, is that this is a really inexact process. Remember when I said earlier, they have overlapping ranges. They have, adult cubs that stay with their mothers for years. The chances of getting the right cat, especially in rough terrain, are not actually that high. which means a lot of needless death. And especially in areas where there's not a great gene pool, where we see signs of genetic stress from low diversity, killing the wrong cat can have a big consequence on the whole population overall. So part of the reason why we do everything in our power to avoid a depredation permit is just because it is very inexact. Not only is it inexact, but it doesn't give you your animal back. It's retributive. What we want to do is stop the loss in the first place. So, misconceptions about coexistence. Only urban activists promote non-lethal management. Hi, I'm a fifth generation sheep rancher. I've successfully been using non-lethal management for the last about 8 years. I used to lose about 15% of my lambs every spring, mostly to coyotes. I haven't lost a lamb to a depredation in about 6 years, of any kind from any animal. And we have a large population of mountain lions where we are. We regularly get them on game camera. They live where we live. Our neighbors do sadly have depredations. We do our best to help them, but these systems work. This picture, I took this picture. I helped a ranch that was calving and was having coyote losses during calving to set up this very hot wire. You can see these little black blobs in the background and this tiny little black blob that's a calf. That's coyote fur. Is that coyote learned a very spicy lesson? I think something that is often a misconception is that you can't do good coexistence work unless you love these animals. You don't have to. I'm not here to, we just talked about all the cool things about mountain lions, but it's okay with me if we finish this talk and you still hate them. What I want is for this to work for your operation. That's what's best for everybody. And like, if you derive joy from zapping a coyote on its butt, and convincing it not to eat your calf, that's fine with me. That is still a coyote that's going to go on to learn a lesson and live successfully alongside livestock. Dead animals don't learn, and they also tell no tales. They don't teach the next animal that comes along anything. But a mother coyote who learns not to mess with calves will also teach her cubs, not to mess with calves too. Same with mountain lions. So predator identification, I love this. This comes from Cheetah Conservation Botswana. I really want to remind everybody here that there are cultures around the world who have been coexisting successfully with large predators for millennia and doing it really well. In Botswana, they don't just have wolves, bears, mountain lions, like we have here. They have lions, spotted hyenas, brown hyenas, leopards, cheetahs, jackals, caracals, domestic dogs, aardwolves, servals, just a huge suite. And this handy chart shows track types, parts of the animal that's eaten, whether or not the animal in question is a bone chewer, whether or not they eat stomach contents. I love this, and I would love to see something like this wildly circulated for North America. I think it's really important that we understand that American ranching, post-colonial American ranching, is really in its infancy. And we have a lot to learn from other parts of the world who've been doing this really well for a long time, like Botswana. So this also comes from Cheetah Conservation Botswana. I also love it. This is from an educational pamphlet. This is translated into English, but this is sent out to farmers in their communities. So no crawls. So in Botswana, it's called a crawl. In Zimbabwe, it's called a boma. What it is traditionally a night pen made of thorn bushes. In modern times, you might see these made of electric fence or barbed wire. So this means no crawls, no night shelter, few trees, poor vegetation, low production, livestock in poor condition, no livestock protection. When livestock and wild game are poorly managed, all can feel the effects. So what they're saying in Botswana is consider your whole ecosystem. Consider your design choices. Animals that are unprotected, in poor condition, and farms that are over impacting their surrounding wild vegetation, where there isn't other prey options, are more likely to have issues. So a great exercise for this is walk around your ranch and look at it through a deer's eyes and look at it through a lion's eyes and ask yourself, is this are there gaps here that could be taken advantage of? And is there enough here to support the native mammals that also depend on this land? So I'm going to show you some video and I'm going to ask you this question. Is this a mountain lion? Feel free to put it in the chat. Is that a mountain lion? So these are all real videos that I've been sent by homeowners with that question. Is that a mountain lion? No, that's a bobcat. That's a bobcat. See, spots on the ears, short tail, bigger than a house cat, but not by a lot. Look at it in comparison to that garbage can. That's a bobcat. Is this a mountain lion? Nope, that's a gray fox. So big ears, long tail, back this up again. Skinny, pointy nose. Look at it compared to that patio furniture. Quite small, right? These little guys, they climb trees. They're rarely bigger than yay high. It's not a mountain lion. Love this one.
My God, Tim. That's not mine.
Okay, so I don't share this to like make fun of folks. Scale is hard to see at a distance sometimes. Is that a mountain lion? That's a house cat. Look at it again.
My God, Tim.
See the proportions, the small ears, the low-hanging belly, the little tail, the tabby markings, the size compared to the fence. That's a domestic cat.
My God, Tim.
Okay. This a mountain lion. Yes. These are mountain lions. And as you look at this, because there's a couple videos here, can you tell? Are those males or females? Are those cubs or adults? Those independent juveniles, or is one of them a mother and the other a kitten? I have an educated guess, but I wouldn't put money on it. And I'm willing to bet that unless there's, a wildlife biologist in the audience, which there could be, in which case, hello, I'm willing to bet that most of us couldn't make a great determination here. Okay. Let me try to get forward here. Uh-oh. Okay. So next thing is feline or canine. I get this all the time. I get this every day. Here on the left, we've got a feline. You can see there's no claw marks. You can see the big kind of M shape of the pad. And then here on the right, you can see we do have claw marks. The overall track is much taller and skinnier, more pyramid shaped in the pad. That's a dog. These are also both real photos. So Barnyard CSI, this is the section where we're really going to get into it and we're going to look at some dead stuff. I know your mileage may vary, but this is where we actually get to talk about what this stuff looks like. So this is a mountain lion kill. This is what a deer looks like that's been depredated on by a mountain lion. This is what they're supposed to do, but I'm going to point a couple of things out. You can see over here in this top right corner, there's a pile of guts that has been pulled out and dragged away. Here, there's the rumen and stomach of the deer. It's been detached, but it hasn't fully been taken away because, again, this lion got interrupted. This wasn't a lion that got to finish their meal. And you can see the rib ends of the deer are gone. They've been eaten. And that the meat on the back legs is gone. It's been kind of butterflied. This is classic mountain lion. So dog versus cougar. This is really important. Again, there's around 3,500 mountain lions in the state of California. There's about 5 million dogs in California. So dog attacks, just due to sheer numbers, are a lot more common. So over here on the right, we have a lot of small superficial wounds around the armpit, around the face. The sheep were not cached. They're not covered in sticks. The rumens aren't taken out. A bunch of wool is superficially torn up, but not specifically removed. Mountain lions will pull wool and fur in a very systematic way, but not in a chaotic way like dogs will. Dogs harass livestock. Sometimes they run them to death. They cover them in small wounds. The vast majority of depredations that I respond to are dogs, just because there are so many more dogs. And dogs, unlike a lot of wildlife, don't avoid humans. They're not afraid of humans. So over here on the left, this was a mountain lion. And this is from a ranching group. They caught and killed the cat that did this, but this is pretty classic. You can see that it's covered in sticks and grass. That's a cache. And I've been in lion caches, and they're very, very cool places to be. Sometimes there'll be one cache with the remnants of a bunch of different kills, and sometimes it'll be one like this. Bears will also sometimes do this, but they'll use dirt to cover the animals they kill, and lions won't. Lions use pretty much exclusively grass and sticks. So these are livestock attacks in Amador County. So what do we think? Which animals did this? So here on the right, we've got a horse. And whoops, go back the other way. Here on the right, we've got a horse. And what you can see is that there's a lot of superficial nicks and scratches on the back of the leg, the back of the back leg, and on the face, and then on the armpit. That right there tells me dog. Dogs don't have claws that grip and shred. Dogs use their teeth, and their teeth are pretty blunt. So you'll often get these kind of scores that they don't break through all the way to like the muscle layer. They don't go all the way through the skin. They'll just go through the top layer, which is what it looks like is happening on the face here. Those marks turn black really quickly in daylight. You can look at the space between them. This poor horse got bit in the face a whole bunch. This horse recovered. These are superficial marks. This little calf, on the other hand, look how deep that wound is, and look where it is, that it's on the back of the neck. Mountain lions almost never successfully kill calves, statistically, but we have had a mountain lion ride around on the back of one of our calves, and they do occasionally make attempts at them. And this calf also lived, but I would be willing to bet that that would be a mountain lion. And a reason why is the injuries to the back of the head, injuries to the jaw, injuries to the face. Those are more often mountain lions, and it's sliced all the way through the epidermis, and you've got visible, kind of under layer there. That looks much more like mountain lion to me. So, total losses by cause for cattle and sheep in California. This chart is, you can see here, it's from USDA APHIS. Again, this is the trappers. APHIS is a branch of the USDA that traps wildlife. So these are not animal activist numbers. This comes from the trappers. So death losses from predators, mature animals in cattle, 1.1%. So 98.9% of all losses are not from predators. For calves, it's 5.8. So 94.2% of animals that die unintentionally, this is not that are harvested for food, but that die unintentionally, are not predators. For sheep, the numbers are a little different. Just under half of lambs that die unintentionally are predators. But this also includes all types of predators. This is not just mountain lions, and this is also domestic dogs are included in this. So just under half of lambs. I raise lambs. They are nature's tater tots. They are very, very delicate, vulnerable creatures. That number doesn't surprise me. For adult sheep, it's just under 20%. So again, smaller animals, you would think that you would see more adoption of tools. But if you look down at this chart, and you look at sheep producers, Only 58%, just above half, are using any form of deterrent tool. And again, when we talk about deterrent tools, we're talking about preventing the loss of your animal before it happens. If just over half, are all that's using these tools, then it would seem like it wouldn't be that big of a concern to the community that you'd see more adoption. Interestingly, goat producers, 93% are using tools here. And I think partially that might be because there's less of a history in California of like large scale goat production. Most people who have goats have smaller numbers. There's a lot of pet goats. It also might be that, you kind of need electric fencing to keep goats in, and that counts as a depredation tool, because if you've ever tried to fence goats, they're very difficult. If you look here at the numbers, fencing and guard dogs, only about 6%. Guard dogs and fencing for goats, 3.9%. Night penning only for sheep, 3.4%. Again, only 20% of cattle producers are using any kind of tool at all. So like the slide that I showed previously about the electric fencing around the calving pasture, that was only used during calving because that was the only time that there was a problem. That would count as that beef producer using a non-lethal tool. You don't have to be using these things all the time for them to count. They can be targeted in a specific instance. What this data tells me is that we have a huge opportunity to increase adoption of these common sense management tools. And we could really, really change those percentages, because the reality is a lot of people aren't using these tools at all. Part of that is because until recently, the trapper was free because it was a government-funded program and these tools were not free. That might be switching up. There are some counties like my county in Mendocino that no longer has a funded trapper program. And there are other programs like my program that does give people these tools for free. You can send me an email and say, hey, I want to try fox lights, and I can send you free fox lights. So, that dynamic is shifting where there's less of a financial burden to try these tools, and there's also less availability for free lethal tools. So, coexisting misconceptions number 2, once a livestock killer, always a livestock killer. That's not actually the case. So there have been a couple of instances of collared lions, one in particular who was tracked very closely through his whole life. He had a radio collar on. He didn't make a move that researchers didn't know about. He killed a sheep once. He didn't get to successfully eat the sheep because he immediately got chased away by their livestock guardian dogs. It was clearly a very traumatic experience for him because he never tried it again and avoided sheep farms in the future. So again, dead lions don't learn, but living lions do and can. That said, lions will camp out in one area where there's an ongoing source of food that isn't defended. So they will hit the same farm over and over again if they're allowed to. Another way that this crops up that I would not have thought before I started doing this work is actually feral cat colonies. People who feed feral cats outdoors, especially who leave the food outdoors, will sometimes have a mountain lion show up and pick off feral cats until they're all gone. So again, they're individuals, they're adaptable, they will take advantage of an ongoing source of low effort food. But once a livestock killer, not always a livestock killer. If they're prevented from having success and they have a really aversive bad experience, we have really good data that they will not try it again. So ranches are legally allowed to shoot on site. We already talked about that. Ranchers have the same laws as everybody else, can be prosecuted and have been prosecuted. Please, please do not, please don't confess to crimes in public. Please don't do that. Please follow the law and don't make yourself vulnerable to something like that, because the law does apply to you. Even if you are an ag preserve, the law still applies to you. Hunting reduces conflict. Hunting has been shown in over many studies to increase conflict because of what happens with the fracturing and social chaos after the removal of a territorial stable adult. Alpacas, llamas, and donkeys will protect sheep and goats. We're going to get into that more in a minute, but all three species are regularly preyed on by cougars. I do not recommend that as your strategy. Adding deterrent tools gradually is best. So this seems very intuitive to people, and this happens a lot of the time when I'm talking to folks about adopting deterrent tools, where they're like, well, I don't want to light my whole property up. I don't want this to be really annoying. I want to try one thing first. So these are folks who are already having a problem, sometimes who've had multiple depredations, sometimes within days of each other. I had one elderly woman who had a mountain lion who was coming by her coop in her backyard and taking a chicken every day, like it was a KFC drive-through. And by the time the lion had taken about 10 chickens, she thought maybe she would try leaving her porch light on at night. So wildlife is deterred most effectively by an initial all-out phase, which can be scaled down over time. So this is coming from field research, from my experience, and also from the animal behaviorists at the Oakland Zoo who work with mountain lions directly, the keepers there. It is best to go all out initially, and then you can scale it back. You don't have to have, like flashing lights and electric fence around your property all the time. But if you're having a problem in the moment, you want to go maximalist initially. Okay, so mountain lion depredation response. So we actually have had a mountain lion come and eat our animals. What do we do now? The immediate response is to prioritize safety of people and animals, anti-habituation deterrence. We want this mountain lion to change their mind and move on. We want to navigate the legal system. Sometimes the best thing for everybody concerned is legal depredation permits. So how do we do that? We want to be on the same page with our neighbors. Lions don't know about property lines, and they have big territories. So if we have a lion that is, coming by and taking goats, we want to talk to our neighbors. We want to get on the same page. I know that can be dicey because you might have really different desires of how to approach this. But these are usually community-wide problems that need community-wide responses. Long-term management, planning for wildlife safety, understanding your local ecosystem, making coexistence part of the culture of your operation. So we have, what do we do when something is actively going wrong, which is usually when people reach out to me? And then what do we do in the long term to prevent it from happening going forward? We're going to talk about both of those things. And I just threw in the middle this little picture of an air horn. Like I said, I have lived through the experience of having a mountain lion that was habituated to eating livestock, that was hanging around and hitting every little farm on our road. And it's very stressful when that's happening. We were the only ones that didn't have livestock killed, because by then we had adopted several different non-lethal methods that we were using during that time really, really carefully. But I did go over to my neighbor's house to help with a goat that had been injured by a lion that we were not aware was still in the barnyard and could not get out past us, who did bluff charge us, which was a very intense experience. And very formative for me, and part of why I ended up working for Mountain Lion Foundation. This was before I had ever done anything with that organization. And my neighbor had a horn and blew that horn at the mountain lion, and I was yelling and stomping and doing everything you're supposed to do, and it did not work as well as this horn. So I always carry around one of these little gas canister marine air horns. They're cheap. They're like $10, $15. And that should just be part of your kit. That's part of your kit, but especially when you've had a lion sighting in your neighborhood, especially if you're going out to check stock at night. I've been carrying one around since that happened, which was maybe 6 years ago. I've never blown it at a mountain lion since. I've seen mountain lions multiple times since, but never one that was threatening that I felt like I needed to blow it at. But I have blown it at loose dogs who are harassing my sheep multiple times. And, it's just a general good safety thing to have. You could slip and break your ankle and need someone to be able to find you. You could need to break up a dog fight if you have a loose dog on your farm that's attacking your sheep or attacking your dog. There's all sorts of reasons why these are great things to have, and I'm sure glad that my neighbor had a horn in that moment. Okay, so as we're going to get into the nitty-gritty about what these tools actually are, I want to talk philosophy for a second, which is that we are stacking the Swiss. So nothing in life is perfect. Every lion is an individual. Some of them will be bolder, some of them will be more shy. We work with the Oakland Zoo, who take in orphaned mountain lion kittens. They're one of the few facilities who are able to actually do medical care for injured wild lions and then re-release them. And they also take in young cubs who are orphaned who are not releasable. And talking directly to them, they have night and day different personalities in the lions that they work with. What works for one lion might not work for another lion, which is another reason why it's better to invest in the lions you have than to have this revolving door of new lions, which is what happens when lions are being killed or driven away. Um, but every tool that we have has holes in it. So if you think of a piece of Swiss cheese, it's my invisible Swiss cheese, it has holes in it. But the holes are a little different than the next slice. So if you stack those slices up, they will cover each other's gaps. So when we start talking about these tools, I don't want you to be thinking of which tool am I going to try. I want you to think of which suite of tools am I going to try, and which of them could I live with as part of my regular routine, and which of them would I maybe pull out when I have some extra cause for concern because there's been a sighting or because I'm lambing right now. So we'll be thinking about it that way. We're designing for resiliency. We're stacking our Swiss cheese. Okay, so deterrence methods. And this text here that's on the screen comes from the DFW. This comes from Washington. And my organization actually helped them write this pamphlet. So we were co-authors of this pamphlet. But wild animals often avoid things they do not understand, which is it's an accessible way of saying that they're very neophobic. They don't like new things. They don't like novelty. Deterrent methods may discourage carnivores. They also discourage prey species. So livestock guardian dogs, lighting, noisemakers, carcass removal. They may not fully protect pets and livestock. You might want to do different things. So this person down below, they had a mountain lion come over their fence on its way from the neighbors where it had done a depredation. And they wanted to install some deterrent devices. So what I'm holding in my hand there, I'm also very pregnant in that picture, but I'm holding a motion activated solar alarm that can be set to go off during the night and the day or only at night, that makes flashing lights and a terrible high-pitched noise. We set those up along their fence and it worked great. So deterrent methods, carcass removal. If you've had an animal killed by a mountain lion, do not leave it out. They will keep coming back to it to eat. They often will do that for 5 to 10 days, usually fewer days in a wetter climate, but they will hang around if there's a carcass to eat. That's their main feeding method. That's caching. Enclosed shelter for animals at night for small operations. Honestly, if you're just doing that, if you're putting them into a lion-proof shelter from dusk to dawn, you're already head and shoulders ahead. That will get rid of most opportunities for depredation. Livestock guardian dog, sheltered facility for lambing. That means maybe you don't barn them all the time, but maybe just for the couple of weeks while you have new lambs, because that is the most vulnerable period. Permanent electric fencing or flexible temporary electric fencing, like the Premier One mesh that we use. Flaidry. So flaidry gets talked about with wolves a lot. I don't see it in California as much. And turbo flaidry is basically, it's just flaidry, but they use electric wire. What flaidry is a wire around the edge of your fence that has ribbon on it, often reflective, like flashing tape, like you'll see in vineyards for birds. It's doing that, but to deter predators around your livestock. Tripwires, fright tactics or devices, human presence, range riding is a very effective tool. So fright tactics and devices are a big topic in of themselves. What I'm holding right there is a fright tactic. So if we think about it, exclusion and deterrence Exclusion is removing access. So exclusion could be a fence that they can't get through. Exclusion is a barn. Deterrence is changing their mind. It's telling them this is not worth it. I want no part of this. I'm getting out of here. So successful shelters, walls, roof, floors, and doors. So over here far on the left is an example of something you can do if you don't have a permanent barn. It's a livestock trailer. And these goats belong to somebody who did have a depredation from a mountain lion and started using the livestock trailer as a night shelter. One of the things that's so great about that is you can move it. You don't have to herd them all back to one area. You don't have to overuse the zone around your barn. The less good thing about it is that you have to muck it out. And not all livestock trailers are predator safe. Some of the old ones have gaps around the top that are too big, where you might need to like add in some mesh or some, some hog panel. But that's often something that I end up recommending to folks. Many people have livestock trailers and could use them, but it's just not part of their routine. Especially folks who are doing small scale rotational grazing and who don't have the capacity to have a livestock guardian dog, or who are close in proximity to housing and who don't want to have flashing lights or sound alarms because it would bother their neighbors. This is a really great solution. It works super well. Again, like you can have a mountain lion come around during the day, but they're really crepuscular. The vast majority of them are going to be hunting in low light conditions in dusk and dawn. So this is it's a great tool. We also, in the past have helped people build shelters. We usually do 1 or 2 of them a year. We have low cost plans on our website. You want to think about walls, roof, floors, and doors. The roof has to be able to hold at least 200 pounds. Mountain lions don't dig, but dogs do, and bears can, and coyotes can. So having fencing or hog panel around the foundation is really helpful. Personally, I don't love that this structure in the pamphlet has chain link walls because you can see through them, and livestock can be harassed to death through a fence that they can see a predator through, and the predator can see them. Dogs have killed sheep that way, just by panicking them so much that they run around and have a stroke. So I would prefer that this have plywood along the sides. You've also got to make sure that your shelter is built for the animals that you're using. So this little picture on the right, this is a chain link dog kennel. It's light duty. It comes from the pet trade. This is a farm where there was a depredation, and so they tried to put something up, and their rams just took it apart the same day they built it. So you don't want to be spending money and time building stuff that's not going to work. You want to scale it to your animals. If you have a big gnarly buck, big gnarly ram, you want to put them in a big gnarly shelter. So light and sound scare devices. So the marine air horn is a scare device. It's using sound. These things are very, very loud. Really try not to point them at people if you ever have to use one, but that's using sound as a scare device. A Margot gadfly it's a small solar paneled wall mounted alarm. It uses a very, very high pitched shriek. I used one of these, well, a couple of these in a row, but to deter a mountain lion that was regularly using the playground of an elementary school to cross between open spaces. And they were seeing it on their security cameras at like 6 or 7 a.m. before the kids were there, and it made the parents uncomfortable. So they wanted that lion to change that habit. We installed those along the route that it was taking according to the cameras, and the mountain lion absolutely did change its habit and stopped using that playground as a corridor connector. Over here on the right are both battery powered and solar powered fox lights. They are not motion activated. They're random flashing. They come on at dusk, and they stay on all night, and they flash in a random pattern. They were developed in Australia. They work really well. I've used them on my own farm. They've been used at Hopland Research and Extension Center. In the study in Hopland, they didn't actually reduce the overall number of predators on the landscape. Coyotes were still seen on the landscape, but they did reduce the depredation. They reduced the coyotes that were killing sheep. So personally, for me, that's a success. I care what they do, not whether or not they're there. I assume they're gonna be there. This is their habitat. So anything that's going to make them uneasy enough that it changes their behavior. I call that a success, as long as it does that consistently. One thing I don't like about fox lights is that they flash red, white, and blue. So I have had somebody say that they're afraid to use them because their neighbors will think that the cops are at their house. One way of getting around that is they don't need to be mounted high. They have a mounting bracket that's for putting on T-posts, but you don't have to put them on T-posts. You can actually put them at mountain lion height, which is like knee height. They'll still work, and it makes their visibility over long distances a lot smaller, which might mean you need more of them, but also might mean that your neighbors don't see them. You can also hang them upside down. So instead of projecting light up into the sky, it's more at ground level. So Evan and I were talking about this before we got on the webinar, but CAF has a whole webinar just about livestock guardian dogs on their YouTube. And I have a whole webinar just about livestock guardian dogs on the Mountain Lion Foundation's webinar, collection that we have on YouTube that I did really recently. It's such a big topic, and because it exists out there and you can go and watch it at your leisure, I'm not going to dig into it in super granular detail, but I can't not mention them. So livestock guardian dogs are specifically bred to protect. They require care, training, and insurance. However, they are the most effective, up to 98% effective deterrent in studies from the world over, ranging from Africa, all over Africa, to Chile, to Eastern Europe, to British Columbia. They just work. This is an incredibly ancient relationship that we have with these dogs. What can I say? When they work, they're incredibly magic. In the United States, there's a lot of weirdness about livestock guardian dogs. I get into that in a lot more detail, but livestock guardian dogs do need to have specific breeding and specific training. Not just any dog will do, and not just any Great Pyrenees either, especially in the United States, where there's less of a culture of livestock guardian dog usage, and these breeds have been here for less time, and most of them that have been here through the pet trade. So it's worth it to move with caution. What I'll say is that we use livestock guardian dogs on our ranch, and I would never want to be without them. They are phenomenal. And none of ours have ever killed a bear, a coyote, a mountain lion, a bobcat. They work as a deterrent without actually taking the lives of these animals. Chago, the dog in these pictures, this big white dog, I have seen chase a mountain lion. But the mountain lion walked away, and so did he. So they're a very effective way of peacefully coexisting. So I do want to say for a second, llamas and donkeys, do they make good guardians? They don't. There's a difference between protective and aggressive. I would say donkeys are aggressive. Donkeys will often kill lambs because they see them as this, new strange interloper that isn't part of their herd. Donkeys can be very aggressive, especially with canids, but that can also mean that they will kill your dogs. I know people who use donkeys who their main concern is coyotes, and they do have a deterrent effect. But in the Southwest, mountain lions are a primary predator of feral donkeys. So there's that. With alpacas and llamas, I have personally responded to a depredation case where three juvenile mountain lions killed 5 llamas in one night. Llamas are not an effective predator. I've even heard of some sheep and ranching organizations recommending, like, oh, you don't need to lock your sheep up at night, just get a llama. That's not good advice. Llamas are not an a statistically effective guardian animal when it comes to mountain lions. They are prey animals themselves. Guardian dogs are part of the flock. Just having a dog on your ranch is not enough. Remember, mountain lions are not existing in this untrammeled wilderness where they've never smelled a dog before. They know what fences are. We have a lot of footage of them just walking along fences with a dog on the other side of the fence, and they know the dog can't get out. Just having a dog on your property, even a livestock guardian type breed, is not enough for it to be a deterrent. The dog needs to be bonded to and with the livestock for it to work. So temporary versus permanent fencing, home versus commercial scale and cost. I really don't recommend permanent lion-proof fencing. Every now and again, someone asks me, but this little graphic is what it would have to look like. It would need to be this 8-foot T-post with 6-foot horse fencing and an overhang with barbed wire and electric wire. Most of us don't want to live with that, and most of us couldn't afford to build that at anything more than a backyard scale. The other issue, even with this graphic, is it only shows the overhang going one way. And I've been contacted specifically by an animal shelter where they had this overhang that was going into their yard because they built it to keep their rescue dogs in. Well, a mountain lion was able to go right up and over it into the yard, but then wasn't able to get back out, and it had to be hazed out by CDFW. So I don't really recommend building permanent giant dinosaur fences. It's just not realistic for most of us. What we use is Premier One mesh fence. I use the 42-inch. It works quite well. Can a mountain lion jump it? Yes. Sure they can. They're great jumpers. I have not experienced mountain lions wanting to do that. I have experienced once a mountain lion knocking it down because they attempted to go over it, got shocked, were really startled, and pulled it down as they ran away. Bears sometimes do the same thing. You kind of, with the mesh fence, sometimes even when it works, it breaks, and you have to keep that in mind. But it works great, especially in addition to also having livestock guardian dogs, or also having lights, or also doing night penning if you're lambing. So something like this, these are my sheep. That's out on a grazing contract we did in Yolo County. Something I might do if I knew for a fact there was a lion around, which I actually did there. I got game camera footage of a lion walking right along the trail. We didn't lose any sheep, but there was a lion who was there, who was actively present. We didn't have any problems. But something I might do if I had lambs is I might make a moat. I might make a hot night pen in the center of this field, and then have the dogs loose around it at night, and then let them out into the rest of the pasture during the day. There are all kinds of ways to use this tool. It's very effective at keeping coyotes and loose dogs out, and it's actually quite effective with mountain lions, even though in theory they could jump it. It's new and weird enough. It makes a clicking electric sound. It blows in the wind. It's a bright color, that all of those are deterrent on their own. But also electric shock is really effective. What I will say about these fences, they have to be hot and they have to be tight. If you have sagging between poles, you have a dangerous situation. Your animals can get tangled and die. Wildlife can get tangled and die. Cold fence is dangerous. Loose fence is dangerous. I've also been to a ranch that was having depredation issues with mountain lions, and so installed this fence and then told me it didn't work. I came out and checked it, and they had their leads crossed. So all of their charge was going down their grounding rod into the ground, and their ground clip was connected to their fence. So that's backwards. So there are things like that too. There's all sorts of videos on the internet about how to set these up safely and correctly. They do have to be managed for fire risk. They do have to be hooked up right with the electricity going where it's supposed to go and not going into the ground. There's ways to find that, on YouTube with the Google, but I'm also available to help people troubleshoot things like that. So proactive coexistence is really the long-term solution. We're not going to get rid of these animals. We've tried. You remember, it was the government policy to completely wipe them out, and it failed. And that's no longer government policy. So again, they live here. Our only option is to coexist with them. And if we're coexisting proactively, we're less likely to lose animals in the first place. Again, remember, the depredation process is retributive. You don't get your animal back, and it only factors in after you've already had losses. So we want to prevent them in the first place. So again, a native animal in its native habitat is not an emergency. They're supposed to be here. Just seeing them is okay. And actually, in fact, ranches are important refugia for these animals. Just managing the land that you're on well is a really critical piece in the conservation puzzle. These are creatures who are facing many, many existential threats, from rodenticide poisoning to mercury poisoning to wildfire to, highways that are bisecting their territories that make it very hard for them to get to each other for breeding. A well-managed ranch can be a really great asset, and doesn't need to mean that you just have to accept losses either. So what we want here is a safe world for lions and for lambs and for us. So I'm just going to remind everybody that the landscape we live on is safer with lions than without it. They help keep us safe from chronic wasting disease, from Lyme disease, from quite a few deaths from vehicle strikes. I don't know how many of you have hit a deer with your car. I have. It's terrifying. And also that coexistence is a relationship that requires adaptation over time. Mountain lions are individuals. Some of them will have different habits than others. Training the lions that you have is a much, much less chaotic way to live your life than to have this revolving door of new lions, which is what happens when lions are being killed in your area. They're much like us. Having a stable population means everything's better for everybody. However, they're large predators. That's the reality. And they can and very rarely do hurt people. So being informed, having the appropriate tool set for your situation, and being in communication with your team, whether that's your employees or your family or your neighbors, is really important. I went to school for ag, and I never had a single class on any of this. But for those of us who are actually working out on the landscape, we are more likely to be seeing these animals in our day-to-day life than most people who are studying conservation or wildlife biology in a classroom and who aren't boots on the ground every day. So I really think that that gap is a problem, and we need to be bringing these worlds together. For those of us who are working on the landscape, we need to know this stuff. And we're also a source of expertise that we can bring back to the scientists who are studying these tools. Like I said, I recommend peer-reviewed tools, but tools get enough energy to get peer-reviewed because people who are early adopters and people who are in the field come up with solutions and bring them to researchers. So that's all of us. So anyway, for more information on all of these common sense things, and then also more deep dives for places to look for the sources of these studies, more specific questions, it's just mountainlion.org. We have all kinds of information on our website and a YouTube channel with a whole bunch of educational webinars like this, and on a bunch of other topics, everything from wildlife crossings for roadways to ranching in other parts of the world, to big cat conservation in Africa. We just recently did one from Namibia. So with that, I'm going to open it up to questions. And let's see, let me get in the chat here. Okay. Oh my gosh, it's so great to see all of this because I was not looking at it while we were going. Cool. So which wildlife camera would you recommend? Honestly, I use the cheap ones. I have mostly been using those little camo folding types. There's a couple different brand names. Um, they all work. Plenty of people in our organization use the really, really like high tech cameras that take beautiful pictures. All of my pictures are like they look like flip phone pictures. Um, but also like the cameras are cheap, you know. So it depends on what you're using them for. Do you want to do wildlife photography? Or are you just looking to monitor what's around on your ranch? We actually have a whole webinar just about this on our YouTube channel. If you're more interested in game cameras and how to set them up, check out our YouTube. So is there a way to have a guardian dog without having a human living on the property? Yeah, totally. Um, we have a livestock guardian dog with our flock on land that nobody's living on right now because we're doing a vineyard grazing contract. Um, Ideally, that dog is bonded to the sheep and likes you and is willing to go to the vet with you and be handled by you, but you're not their primary social outlet. In general, though, I do feel like American ranching is really kind of harsh and hands-off with livestock guardian dogs in a way that their cultures of origin are not. If you look at Northern Europe and Eastern Europe, where these dog breeds come from, they're really much more a part of the family because the herds are too. People are with them all the time. And I think that the very American idea that you should never pet a livestock guardian dog, that you should ignore them. Personally, I think that that tends to make dogs that are like more neurotic and more needy because they're wondering what they've done to offend you. You know, it's like it's a pretty big deal punishment in dog culture to be ignored. So our dogs, you know, they will get in our lap, they will greet people, they are social, but their primary relationship is to the livestock. Oh, thank you, Sanjana. Yeah, you know, I really appreciate everybody taking the time, especially at the end of the day on a Sunday, to go through this topic. There's always a lot of stuff that we don't have time for. And I really appreciate you know, a chance to get to dig into it. I also appreciate everybody, you know, being like, oh, dog, fox, bobcat, you know. It's I think the reality is that a lot of folks just don't know. And again, there's something else I was wondering if anybody would pick up on. Those were all Ring cameras or home security camera footage. None of those were taken on a cell phone. None of that came from a person that had eye line to that animal. Those are all from a home security system. So these are, you know, folks who that wildlife has been in their yard the whole time. They just haven't seen it before. So, you know, let's see. Something that I wanted to maybe go over one more time is, you know, okay, what do we do if we're having an acute crisis? Where we're losing livestock left and right, our neighbors are losing livestock. We talk to CDFW. CDFW tells us that they're not going to do anything because none of us have deterrent tools in place and we're all on separate parcel numbers. So each of our losses counts as one strike. Essentially, we're never going to get a permit. We're on our own, right? I get told this story a lot. One of the first things to do is contact us and we'll give you resources. If you can possibly move your sheep from the area that they've been, I'm just going to use sheep as stand-in livestock. It could be anything. Do that, you know, put them into a different situation. So like if you see here with this pen, we were actually in the middle of a move. This is like a temporary holding pen while we set up a larger electric fence. But if we'd had a depredation in that field, I would move them out of that field and then also get rid of those carcasses. Do not let them lay around. I have responded actually to a ranch where the ranch owner was pretty elderly and he didn't really have the capacity to bury carcasses. So whenever he had an animal that was dying of natural causes, he was tying it up to the end of his ATV and just dragging it out into a far pasture and leaving it there. And mountain lions were coming and eating those carcasses, and then they were taking that behavior to neighboring ranches. So it was this larger issue where we had ranchers reach out to us and say, oh, we're losing livestock and we don't know why. And what we were able to identify is that there was an elderly rancher who had elderly animals. These were animals he'd had a long time, and they were beginning to die of natural causes. And he didn't have the capacity to bury them physically. And so he was dumping them, and they were being scavenged. And then that scavenging behavior was turning into depredation behavior. So what the surrounding neighbors were able to do is say, hey, instead of doing what you're doing, call us and we'll come and bury your alpacas. In this case, it was alpacas. So that's an example of like a community-wide response to a problem. And that really often is what this has to be, because again, like a mountain lion can have territory that ranges up to, 20 or more square miles. And very few of us on this webinar own more land than that or lease more land than that. Most of us are going to be sharing a mountain lion family with our neighbors. So the more we can do to get on the same page, the better. So again, like with creating an aversive experience, one of the things that I might do, move them to a new place and then booby trap the heck out of the area. Something that we do once a year, we do a staff and volunteer training, and we have a coexistence camp, which we move around. It's actually going to be in North Bend, Washington this year. It's also been at our ranch for a couple of sessions, where we get together groups of people who are mostly coming from the conservation world, who don't have the ag experience, and teach them how to use electric fence, teach them how to use deterrent devices, teach them the ins and outs of livestock guardian dogs. I always love having ranchers join those sessions, both because we get a lot out of having them there, and also they get tools they can bring back to their operation. But one of the things that we do is we set up deterrent devices that are day-night activated. And then once we have this whole gauntlet set up, we send our campers through it after dark. So they get to experience what it is actually like to be the mountain lion in that case. We have one group set up deterrence in one area and another group set up deterrence in another area, tell them where the lambs are, where the goal is to get to, and send them out in the night and have them trigger these devices. It's very fun. Mostly it's very fun for me because it's quite, it's quite alarming for them. So let's see. Yeah, I know. And maybe it's like a little mean-spirited, but it's all in good fun. As far as next steps, things to know, what I would really recommend is if anybody has more questions, reach out to me. I'm easy to find. Our website's really easy. It's mountainlion.org. And we've got a whole bunch of webinars on all these topics on our YouTube channel. So thank you so much for spending this time. I appreciate you all so much, and have a great time at the rest of the conference.
Thank you so much, Gowan. And we will see the rest of you hopefully tomorrow back at the conference. And enjoy the rest of your evening, everybody.